Part of my mission in life is to be the person who goes first. I talk about my struggles because I want other people to feel safe to talk about their struggles too. Because I know from experience that owning our stories is the beginning of healing them. When we keep our true selves hidden, hiding our challenges and messy emotions, we miss out on the opportunity to connect with other people. We feel isolated and lonely and like there's something wrong with us, not knowing that there are many people out there who are feeling exactly the same way. This doesn't just apply to people who grow up in homes with violence. We all have our struggles. All you have to do is look at the number of people who are reaching out for mental health support at the moment to see how many people are in distress. Yet we keep our pain to ourselves because we don't want to burden others or because we feel ashamed. We go through periods of struggle and we feel flawed and damaged and inadequate and unacceptable. We look at other people and we feel like they're doing everything so much better than we are. These feelings of being unlovable and unworthy can be so overwhelming. It can keep us isolated and stop us reaching out from others. This was the experience for my mum. When I was about to start year 7, my dad left our family for good to live with another woman and her children. Finally, I thought it was going to be great. All the tension was going to leave my house and we were going to be like those families on TV where you have a working mother, she'd go out and get a key. We never locked our door, but I really wanted a key. I had like a total plan in place as to how it was going to pan out. But it turned out that life had other plans. So one day I came home from school and discovered Mum laying sprawled face down on the couch, sobbing. Sobbing in a way that I'd never heard anyone sob before. It was great racking howls of despair from the pit of her stomach. And beside her was a 4-litre cask of wine. I patted her on the back and asked if she was okay, but she just kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." So I stayed, holding her hand and patting her, but she kept on sobbing, and I felt more and more hopeless. My mum had always been the person to look after me. She made me lunches, drove me to sports practice, and watched me perform on stage. She'd never had the strength to stand up to Dad on behalf of us kids, but I understood that from a very young age she was out of her depth. She didn't know what to do. She was frozen in terror. She didn't know what to do, so she did her best, trying to be a good girl, trying to make us good kids, so that none of us would have to get in trouble. While Dad was in the house, she couldn't give us safety, but she was a soft and constant presence who'd never intentionally hurt anyone. She was quiet and gentle and fragile, and I'd always felt deeply protective of her. Seeing Mum crying in such an unhinged way made my heart ache. But seeing her so flagrantly drunk, alone in the middle of the day, was a total shock. Up until that point, my mum had rarely drank. My parents didn't drink a nightly glass of wine. They sat and had a cup of Nescafe. You know, they didn't go out very often. So I thought it was just going to be a one-off thing. But one drunk day turned into 2, and then that rolled into weeks, and then months, and then years, and eventually it became hard to picture a time when my mum was sober. Dad was gone, and we only saw him once or twice a year, and we lived 700 kilometres away from our extended family. Mum had always been very shy, so she didn't have really any friends. So there were no adults to witness what was going on in our house. And it didn't occur to me that there might be people who could help. Besides, my mum was so full of shame and self-loathing. The last thing I wanted to do was to make her feel worse about herself. I didn't want to embarrass her, and telling people about her drinking would have felt like a betrayal. I was also scared that if anyone found out, they would take us away from her. Mum tried. She tried and she failed. She tried AA for a while, and she came back with a poem that she plastered up all over the house. It said, "Grant me the serenity to accept the things which cannot be changed, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." I desperately wanted to stop my mum drinking. I tried every way I could think of. I went out of my way not to be a burden to her. I encouraged her and supported her and was her never-ending cheerleader, telling her I believed she could do it. I begged her, and when that failed, eventually I got angry and disappointed. But then I realised I needed to put some of the wisdom from the poem she had brought home to use in my own life. I had to accept that whether or not my mum drank was not something I had control over. It wasn't something I could change. But there were things in my life where I could have an impact. My mum had left school in year 9. My dad had left school in year 10. My sister dropped out in year 11. I was determined to get out of Rockhampton and go to university. School was a thing I could impact. I could control how much effort I put in, and I was determined it was going to be my salvation. Now I just want to check in again. Bottoms, chairs, breathing, feet, all good? You all good? Excellent. There's no denying that traumatic experiences leave you with scars. But I like to think of these scars as cracks. As Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light hits in. I also like to take the kintsugi approach to the cracks. Kintsugi is a Japanese art form that takes broken pottery and glues it back together using resin infused with gold. It's about celebrating rather than hiding the breaks, highlighting them with gold instead of covering them up. And I find it personally much more helpful to think of myself as a sparkling piece of Japanese art than a broken plate. Because there is gold in the cracks. My pain is also my compassion. My vulnerability is my strength. My confusion is my need to understand myself and others and the world around me. My awareness of all I lacked growing up makes me never-endingly grateful for all of the things that I have in my life now. My grief for my own family drives me to try and make it better for other families. The journey I've been on to overcome my childhood has driven me to challenge the assumptions I made when I was young and to replace them with more helpful ideas. And one of the most helpful ideas for me has been separating out the difference between an event happening in our lives and the stories we tell ourselves about what that event means. So I'm a writer. I live in the realm of stories. But it wasn't until I recognized that it was the stories I'd been telling myself that were having the most impact on me. And if I could change them, I could claim back the power I had over my own narrative. So what does it mean to separate out an event from a story? So there's an event, like my dad hitting me or my mum drinking. Those events aren't things that I had control over. But then there was a story I was telling myself about what those events meant. Dad hitting me meant I was unlovable. Mum drinking meant that I wasn't worth enough to stop drinking for. But being aware that these were stories that I was making up, and the events themselves didn't inherently come with this meaning, put me in charge of the meaning I made, so I could have the power to rewrite what I was saying.